Hey everyone, and welcome to another online meetup of ServerlessDays Amsterdam.
Good evening, everybody.
So I'm hosting today, Mark Duiker, and co-host is Stacy. Welcome, Stacy.
Hello, how are you doing?
And it's the first time that you're doing the co-hosting with us. So,
it's my first time doing a full co-host. I did it as an emergency for the last half of last meetup, but this is the first time
actually
planning for it.
Yeah, it's nice that actually normally planned right now.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Welcome. Let's share the screen so we can do some slides. Here we go. So as usual, it's the first Wednesday of the month, and then we will have this online meetup. I think previously Leon talked about changing the frequency, but we haven't decided anything yet. We'll probably have a meeting about it for the new year to decide how the schedule will going to be. But for now, it's still the first Wednesday of the month. We don't need this. So the agenda for tonight, we have two speakers, Barbara and Daniel. Both going to talk about Azure functions, but obviously there will be different talks. We have a small break in between, and we plan to close just a bit before 8. Before we start, we do have some house rules. You'll either be watching this from YouTube or Twitch. We also have a Discord channel, so if you want to ask questions, that is the best place to ask your questions. In addition to that, no matter where you're viewing this from, please follow our code of conduct at serverlessdays.nl/COC. So please make sure you read it and know all about it. And we'll also be moderating all of our channels. We are still looking for speakers. We actually have some speakers already lined up for, I think, the next 2 meetups, but we are always looking for new speakers. You don't have to be an experienced speaker. Also, if you're new, we definitely welcome you, and we can also help you with either your slides or if you want to do a rehearsal. So please get in touch. You can either email us at amsterdam@serverlessdays.io or reach us via Twitter or our Discord channel. Something slightly different, not related to Serverless itself, but Microsoft has started their Seasons of Serverless a couple of weeks ago. So every year they do some challenge related to serverless. And this year it's called Seasons of Serverless. And they have every week they have a new challenge related to food this time, and you use all kinds of serverless technology to complete that challenge. So yeah, if you're up for a nice challenge and solve it with serverless techniques, then please go to this GitHub page. All right, that's all I wanted to say for now. So I think we are ready for our guest.
Okay, so if we could get our guest in. Our first speaker tonight is Barbara Forth. She is a Microsoft Azure MVP, MCT, and consultant. She works using Azure, Office 365, and Windows Server Automation. And her talk tonight, When Powers Combine, Azure Function Apps and PowerShell, and I can't wait. It sounds a really cool thing. I hadn't thought about using PowerShell in functions, so I'm so looking forward to this. Barbara, welcome. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. It's fun being here again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. Well, take it away.
All right. Yeah, and we got the screen share.
Yeah, everything's good to go.
And I'll fix my screen. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so like we said, this is When Powers Combine, Azure Function Apps and PowerShell. And for other people who might not have gotten that reference, this goes back to a cartoon somewhere in the 90s. with Captain Planet, where they were all coming together. When they put their rings together and all powers combined, you combined Captain Planet. And I wanted to put a picture in here, but I couldn't find one that I could use free of license. So you have to make it up in your head for yourself. And these are two cool powers combining Azure Function Apps and PowerShell, creating a really cool product that I want to talk about. Well, as was said, my name is Barbara Forbes, an Azure MVP. I work at SCT in the Netherlands, focusing on Azure and automation mostly. I write a blog about this stuff, Forbes with a 4.nl. And if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at BA4BES. And that is also my GitHub handle. And let's go. Just 1 second, I lost the presentation. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so for now, we're going to talk a bit about what is PowerShell and what is Azure Functions and what good are they together. Then I'm going to real quickly look at how you can deploy function apps. There are a few different methods. And after that, I want to show a showcase of a function app that I created where you can clean up resources, which uses some more advanced bindings and combining functions. So I think it's a really cool example to show off. So the first thing we need to think about is PowerShell and what PowerShell actually is. And I think most people that have some kind of Windows administration background are familiar with the concept PowerShell, have used it at one time or another. It's been around for quite some time, and it's always been a great tool for Windows management. And after Windows management, it was also very usable for Azure management. But this is all Windows PowerShell. And since a few years, we are now running on first PowerShell 6 and now PowerShell 7, which is the current version of PowerShell. PowerShell went open source, and a lot of investments were made, and it's now a cross-platform tool. So you can use it on Linux, you can use it on Mac. Development is getting really fast. And it's becoming more and more of a tool that can really help you with your automation and with managing Azure, but it's becoming more and more like an application on its own. And that's where it's available in a function to use it like that. One thing I do want to mention is there's also PowerShell Preview, which is always the newest version. So I found it mostly pretty stable, but this is one you can also use if you want to try the newest features and you want to have a really cool icon on your taskbar, because I really love this icon. The great thing is you can run all three of these on your computer without any issues. They run next to each other. So you can always, if you need something in Windows PowerShell, you need something in Preview, or Preview is not working, you can switch around between the three. If you want to find all code behind PowerShell and all the examples, or download PowerShell yourself, you can go to the GitHub if you want to, or you can use the Microsoft Store now to get PowerShell 7. So that's PowerShell. Now, what are Azure Functions? Azure Functions, the reason why we're here for it is because it's part of serverless compute. And everyone who's here knows that using serverless instantly makes you sound cool. It's just how it is. And what it means when you're using PowerShell scripts is that you can more or less copy and paste your code to the function, and you can start running it. Where maybe if you have run PowerShell scripts before, you're used in an old environment to have a script server to run it on. You do not have to worry about it. You only have to worry about the front end. And the great thing about functions combined with PowerShell is that you can have your script be triggered by events. So if something happens, that can be a request, that could be a schedule, but that could also be if someone puts something in a storage account, for example, and we're going to run through them in a second, see what options we have, then the script starts running. And this can really help with managing Azure in a really broad sense. So everything you want to do in Azure, something that happens in Azure, if a resource, a certain action is performed on it, you can have a function app be triggered by that. So that can really help you in your Azure environment. You can also use it for hybrid or not use it for Azure at all. You can also use it for things that don't have to do with Azure. But there's a lot of use cases available there. By using multiple functions, you can have them all running in parallel, which of course saves a lot of time. And one of the great things which can really help is a connection with other Azure services. So you don't have to bother with finding that connection, or you have to bother with what API you have to use. And you can use APIs if they work well for you, because that is something that can easily be done from PowerShell. But if you want to store the result in a storage account, that is a standard functionality. You do not have to worry too much about that. So that's making life just that bit easier. And now some people might think, yeah, but what about automation accounts? Because automation accounts were always the way to go for PowerShell scripts in Azure. And they still exist, and the function app still exists. So what's the difference? So I put together some differences between the two. For instance, an automation account still uses Azure RM, where functions apps are running on the AZ module or the AZ module. You are able to install the AZ module on an automation account, but you are not able to uninstall the Azure RM module. And that can lead to a bit of difficulties, although it is workable. An automation account already also runs on Windows PowerShell, where a function app now runs by default on PowerShell 7, but it has run on PowerShell 6 if you find some older function apps. Something where an automation account really comes in at a different way than a function app is that an automation account is more suitable for scripts that might be running longer. And I'm thinking of scripts that are generating reports, for example. They often take a long time to run. And an automation account, I think the default time is 30 minutes before it times out, where a function app by default will time out in 5 minutes, and you can stretch it up to 10 in the cheapest plan, or you have to get a more expensive plan. So there, an automation account might be more useful. Another real good case when you're using an automation account is the hybrid worker versus the hybrid connection. A function app runs with a hybrid connection if you want to do some on-premise management from Azure. And an automation account works with a hybrid worker, and that's basically a virtual machine in your on-premise environment. But the thing is that a function app cannot be used to manage Active Directory, and a hybrid worker can. So that might be a use case to use an automation account. And there's one thing that isn't even in there, but where I think an automation account has an advantage at this point if you're using PowerShell, and that scheduling them is a bit easier. Scheduling functions, yeah, you can schedule them at certain times, but you cannot have a function schedule another function at this moment. I think that's coming in the future because it's part of durable functions, but for PowerShell, it's not available yet. So there's a little bit more flexibility on an automation account in scheduling. If none of these apply to you, go with the function app. That's the more development going on, newer technology. And it's a great way to start working. It takes a bit of getting used to, but it's really more focused on application, where an automation account feels more like that old script server that you used to have, but without the server. So, of course, for this talk especially, I would say go with the function app. So how does a function work? This is putting it in a very, very basic diagram. But basically what a function app does, it gets triggered by something. And it can also have input by something. So something is triggering it. It can also take input from other places. Then there's a bunch of magic. And then it creates an output. And this is the really basic schema of what a function is. And with saying that output isn't necessary, input isn't necessary. The only thing with these that's really necessary is a trigger. But these are mostly things that are handed to you that you are able to use and make use of. So let's first look at those triggers. I have a whole list available, and the triggers that you will see the most, because you're probably already used to them, is an HTTP trigger or a webhook or a timer trigger. But especially HTTP trigger is one you see most. It's simple. You do an HTTP request and you get the function starts running. And we'll see some examples along the way. As I said, you can have it be triggered by events. So events in your Azure subscription or in any way that you have something that you have connected to your Azure subscription where you're collecting events, you can have that trigger a script. You can have it be triggered by storage. So if in a storage account a file is added, run a script. A Cosmos database, if an entry is, if something is entered to a Cosmos database, run a script. You can also do it with an IoT hub, so maybe like a doorbell or a Raspberry Pi that sends pictures or something like that. Can have a function app acting on that. And also service bus, and I put durable functions in here as well, which is still in preview. And it's still short-timed, and I'm gonna leave it out of scope because I think I have enough information as it is. But durable functions are now an option if you're using PowerShell functions. So these are all the stuff that can trigger a function, but it can talk to a lot of other options. If you're thinking about that input and that output that I showed, then we're talking bindings, and there are a lot more bindings available. So I made this picture, which is pretty much unreadable. So I'll move to the docs real quickly and make this a bit larger. And scroll down a bit, and here we have a bunch of triggers, a bunch of bindings. And if you look at those last two, you see there are a lot of options available, especially if you're thinking about the output. Queue storage, notifications, event grid, the Cosmos that we talked about, Signal R, SendGrid is a standard connector. So how you can think of this is that you do not have to code to get a connection with these services. It's built in, to say it like that. And also the authentication is built in with it, which can be really handy. For example, you can use SendGrid from PowerShell with the API, but if it's taken away for you and it's just one commandlet, it's probably gonna be less work and you do not have to store that secret. So options like that are available. And as you see, there's a lot of options, a lot of cool things you can do with it. And let's just start by showing an HTTP trigger. I want to show you what it looks like. And this is a pretty crazy project I did this weekend. And yeah, I blame Mark for enforcing me to do this. So say, yes, you can do this. And this is a good idea. I created a storage account name generator, because storage account names are pretty boring. They have to be completely lowercase. There can't be any dashes or anything in there. And there's not a lot of options. So I have one list of words that are adjectives and one list of nouns. And it takes two of them and sees if that storage account is available. I'm going to collect this first. Here I have the option to get the function URL. And you can't see it because I have a blurring application available. I'm just going to call it first, and then I'm going to show you what's actually going on. So here I have PowerShell, and I'll do invoke REST method, and then, no, I can't paste the URL. Good thing it's already there. And I'm going to call it first because that's one thing to keep in mind with the consumption plan, which is a free plan, is that it does have a small startup time. So the first time I call this function, it will take a little more time. And it found a storage account name called Euphoric Desk, which is available right now. Oh God, I hope this is going well, because it's a list of like 5,000 words, so maybe there are bad words in there, but we're going to keep going. Left return, I think that's a great name for a storage account. One more, Skinny Face. Storage account, rock band, you can create everything from it. And it's silly, but this still makes me laugh. So this is not that complicated of a storage account, of a function. And as you see, I got the URL here. And what I wanted to show you, this is where the code is living. If I look at it in the portal, and as you can see, this is just a PowerShell. The two lists of words are in a gist, and I did not create them. I forked them from someone else's gist, and it basically puts them together and takes care of the length of a storage account. It's a maximum of 24 characters, and it checks if the name is actually available by using this, and then it creates a body to return. And this little piece is the return object. So this is the output. There's an output binding, which is an HTTP response. So it responds directly to that request that I just did with HTTP. Now, what we can see here with this integration tab, and I'll zoom out a little bit to get the picture going. Here you see a visual representation of what's actually happening. The function app is triggered by an HTTP request. It starts running that function, so that code we just saw, and it creates that output. It gives back to the user that output. So this can give me an overview of what happens, and it is possible to add inputs and add outputs as much as you need. I can also do some monitoring here and see how often my function app has been running and if it was successful. So this is a quick example, something to use. And this is something I could also do in a web browser. Using that. Acrobatic argument. Okay, I'll stop now because I can do this all night. So that's an example of an HTTP function where I just had to worry about the code, and the rest was pretty much already set up, and I do not have to worry about what virtual machine it's running and everything that's happening with that backend. It's not my problem. I can just write the code and enjoy myself. Oh, and I missed this one. One thing I want to mention is the costs of a function, an Azure function. I said a few times that this is running in a consumption plan. The consumption plan is a pay-per-use service. So you only pay if the function is actually running at that time. If you do not use the function, it's completely free. So you do not have to worry about cost. And even if you pay for it while it's running, this is objectively cheap. This is not expensive at all. I've put a graph over there with an Azure function that I have that is running every day. And this is for 1 month. And I do admit it's not running very long most of the time. It's pretty short-lived. But if you look at that graph, then the function actually cost me a cent for starting itself up for 30 or 31 times. And the most expensive part of that function was the fact that I was monitoring it. I had an alert on it because if it fails, then I want to get a message. So the monitoring is more expensive than the function itself. Now, like I said, this one doesn't do that much, but well, with consumption and with the consumption plan, you really have to make an effort to have a function actually cost you some money, and then it will not. Probably it will take a lot of time before you get it above €5 or $5, to say it like that. So this is great for playing around, for getting used to functions, for getting started with it. And for a lot of use cases, for a schedule, for example, it works fine. But there are some use cases where you might need more speed, you might need a longer runtime, or one that can be important is you do not want the startup time. As you saw the first time I called this function, it took a little bit longer to run it, where if you use one of the other plans, it will start instantly. And really, if you start loading the AZ module, that can take a long time. So that's something to keep in mind. If this is not working for you, you can use an app service plan, which you would also use for an application, or a premium plan, which is dedicated to Azure Functions. And I think an Azure service plan, the one you can use, starts for like 25 euros a month or something like that. So it's not like it's crazy expensive, but that's something you can see if it fits your use case. If you're just playing around, the consumption plan should be fine. So that's all really cool. And I know you all want to create your own storage account generator now. So how do you deploy that? There are a few ways I want to talk about. The first I always want to mention is how to deploy through the portal. The portal is actually a pretty nice experience for Azure function deployment, and it can really help you to get an understanding of what's going on, because you have the visual aspect of how your functions are connected. When I'm using a binding that I have never used before, I always start out in the portal and create it there. A lot of things are already filled in for you, and it can really help you understand how are these services connecting with each other. It's great for testing as well. You can test within the portal, and it's very handy for quick and dirty. Start a deployment, copy paste your code, and you're done. Of course, you do not do that in production, or if you're taking a longer time to develop something. But if it's quick, if you just want to see what a one-liner does, Portal is a great tool for that. Once you get that understanding, I really recommend Visual Studio Code. One of the great things of Visual Studio Code is that you do not actually need an Azure subscription. You can test your functions locally. And of course, after that, you can deploy them to Azure, and you can do that from Visual Studio Code. But for example, if you want to test outside of production, or you do not have a dev subscription, to say something like that, and you want to test something, you can do that all locally. Well, if you don't have an internet connection, no problem. You can do local testing, which is really nice. The debugging is very quick that way, because it's right next to you, and you can make use of all the debugging tools that Visual Studio Code has. And once you're satisfied with your app, you can deploy it directly to Azure with one push of the button. So that's really great for quick development, and I want to demo that one real quick. Here we go. I have a virtual machine set up here with Visual Studio Code. One thing that you do need to do is install some stuff. You do need some applications, and I actually have a list of that. You need PowerShell. Well, this is an old list from the documentation. I think they changed this since then, but you need PowerShell 7. You need Visual Studio Code, of course. You need the PowerShell extension. Well, if you're working with PowerShell, you want to have that anyway. The Net Core SDK, and the Azure Functions core tools. And here they say you need an active Azure subscription. Not necessary. And this sounds like a long list, but these three, the above time, you would have anyway if you're working with PowerShell. And if you don't, consider it, because these tooling can really help you out. So then it's really not that bad. And if you still feel like this is a long list, you can check on my blog. I have a script that installs all these things that I always use for my demo environments. So here I have installed that already. So I have a folder here in Visual Studio Code. I have the PowerShell extension. And if I look here, I have an Azure icon. And as you see, I am not signed into Azure right now. I can sign in if I want to, create account, but I'm not signed in, because I want to show how this works locally. So let's create a new project. And I must admit, I did a little bit of YOLO because I didn't prepare it because I really wanted the first time experience. And this VM has been a bit slow. So we just need to take the time for it to get running. I can see if the function tools are installed. And this is fun that it's now outdated because I installed this like 2 days ago. So good to know there's a new version available. And here we go. So we can create a new project here. And I'll use this folder, the demo folder, and then I can install which language I want to use. Well, we wanted to use PowerShell, of course. And I can use a template here. And you see all these templates are for all those different triggers and bindings we just talked about. Well, these are all triggers. And I'm going to use an HTTP trigger. And I can give it a name. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use HTTP trigger 1. And it asks me for the authorization level, on which the most important thing, if I put it down to anonymous, then everyone in the world can use that function. So for example, the storage generator that I just showed, that's an anonymous one, and you can try it at home if you would want to. So for something like that, that's fine. But if this is doing something in my subscription, then I would want to have a function level where there's a key added to the URL. So not everyone in the world can call that function. I'm going to use anonymous for this one because I'm only going to run it locally. So that's fine. And it's going to create some folders for me. So it says it's finished creating the project. And here it has created all the files that belong to a function. I'm not going to run through all of them because of the time. But here it creates a basic function for me. So I do not even have to write the code. It did that for me. And these settings are all the function settings are all ready to go. I'm just going to change one setting. I'm going to set this to false. The managed identity is where it will download the AZ module as part of the startup, and that makes the startup last a lot longer. And I do not need managed dependency for this function because it's just a hello world function. It does not need them. So I put that off, and let's see local running. So I do func start. And I still need to upgrade, apparently. Oh, it's running the wrong version. Yeah, it's got a point. And what it's doing now, it's starting that function in the background. So in the background, and I see this is really an old version of the function tool, so I should update those. But it's starting that function up so that I can call on it. And here it shows you that trigger. I'm just gonna upgrade those core tools real quickly. There used to be a button that does this for you. That will teach me to do a YOLO. Let me just get the command wheel quickly. That will be faster. Get this over here. And copy link here. And otherwise, I'm just going to call it a night, and you have to believe me that this is working. Oh, wait, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start this up locally. I'm just seeing if I have a folder on it. So there's a lot more stuff on going on here. Yeah. Okay. Sure. So here we can do the same thing. Only I am connected to an Azure subscription here. So it's a bit less cool. So I'll run through this again. Get this going. And here I've got the newer version. There we go. So you see, you get the same screen and it starts running here, and it should be done by now. And what I can do is say again, invoke REST method, and then go to that local address that I just created here. And if I press enter, you will see it starts running here. And it starts deploying, it starts with getting that AZ module, because I didn't turn it off here. Again. So here it will start running again, and as soon as I call this again, it will show in the log what it's actually doing. And as you saw, I just saw it's going to deploy the AZ module, and that's going to take a long time. So I do not want that. And I was able to stop that function running. And here it showed what it will do for me. It showed me errors, it showed me warnings, or it shows information. And as you see, this is an hello world function that says, yeah, you didn't set up a hello. So someone to say hi to. So let's create that. And if I enter that again, I can see it running. I can get all logging in, and it says, hello, serverless. Hello. So pretty quickly to say, in one demo, I got it running twice. Sorry about that. But this is all completely local. I do not have to deploy it if I don't want to. And if I want to, I can deploy it from here directly to Azure and shut it down here. So this is great for testing stuff and for finding out if stuff is actually working. And I use this for all the development that I do. I just need to check the script, because the script is actually is apparently out of date. And the other option that you have is to deploy through Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. And this is where you start running a professional deployment. So if you're running in a team, or if you want to automate testing, you can create a complete pipeline for everything on your deployment. There are default tasks available for that. So you do not need to write that code. And you can put that code directly into Azure, have a direct connection with your Azure function. So I would say, if you're getting started, start out with the portal, play around there, use the testing of options you have available. And if you are developing on your own, or your first development, do that in Visual Studio Code. And if everything is ready for production, move on to Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions. So the showcase I'm going to run through real quickly, because that demo took a little bit more time than was meant to happen. What I created, what I want to show you, is I wanted a function to clean up my Azure resources. I use a lot of resources for demo purposes, and I always forget to delete them, and then they cost me money, and I do not need them after the first day. So what I wanted was a function that could delete the resources for me based on a tag, and run that every night. So every night, everything with a specific tag is deleted. Challenge accepted. Now you would think if I say it like that, it's basically this. I basically need to get all the Azure resources and after that remove them. The thing is that there are dependencies in Azure resources, and there's no way to get them to get those dependencies with PowerShell. So what PowerShell will do is try to remove a resource, take a long time with that, and then conclude I can't remove this because there's still a dependency. So that way, every function I created would time out, or it would only remove half of the function. So I had to find a way around that. And to do that, I used the message queue. And to understand what happens in a message queue, I made this little picture. And a message queue is basically an array. It's an array of, so it's a table, but it's an array of strings, to say it like that. So there's a lot of strings that are input in a queue. And that queue can trigger a function. So as soon as a message arrives in the queue, a function can start running. That function will try to take an action with that string in that queue, and it will end in success or it will end in failure. If it ends in success, it just removes that string directly from the input queue and it's done. If it ends in failure, it will put that string back in the input queue and there with that triggering that function again. And it will do that 5 times. So every string in that input queue has 5 chances to get success. And if it doesn't, then the string is moved to the poison queue, which is to give you the signal, I couldn't get this working. So I saw some functionality here that I could really use. So considering my function, it started on the schedule, like you would expect. And there was a function called start function, which would collect the Azure resources with a specific tag. But instead of starting deleting it themselves, all those resources, their IDs were dropped into a queue. And that queue would then trigger a second function that was called remove first resources. And it would start removing the resources that were in the queue. The good thing about the queue as well is that it will do 5 queues at once. So 5 queues can run in parallel. So it was a lot faster than doing it in one script. So it would start removing those Azure resources. The thing is that I still had to work with those dependencies, and I actually did them manually. There are manually some resources that I know that will fail that first time if there are still dependencies there. So they are pretty much hard-coded in there. And I moved that to the second queue and have a function called remove second resources. That function is exactly the same as the first function, except it has a start sleep before it starts running. So it has a bigger chance that the dependencies are already gone. And then hopefully it would work. And this starts removing Azure resources as well. Now those functions could feed a poison queue with queue messages that has failed to run. And what I did is create 2 functions to go with that poison queue, get first poison, get second poison, and both of them just create an output saying this resource has failed. And on that output, I put Azure monitoring. So the concept was that if it still went wrong, despite the construction, then I would get a message in my email through Azure Monitor saying something went wrong with your script. And since I have set this up, I have not had to use the poison queue. So it has not been triggered. I did not get a message from that. So it seems a bit complicated, but I think this is a really great way to show how you can make use of those bindings and stuff that are connected to it. Now for that, what does that look like? I am gonna show it real quickly. If I can still find it, yeah. This is the function we're talking about. And well, here you go. And if we look here at the functions, then you will see you get a whole list of those functions instead of just that one function that you're used to. And as you see, I have one that's triggered by a timer and the rest are all triggered by the queue. So if I look at remove first resources and I look at that integration, you see it's triggered by Azure Queue Storage with a trigger called resource ID. It removes the first resources. And it has an output to another queue storage. So this is where you see you can have a binding that's connected to something else than an HTTP trigger or nothing at all. So it can push through like that. And in here is just the PowerShell script again, with the resource ID coming in. And these are hard-coded, the resource types that have a dependency that will often stop because of dependencies, and it will try to remove it all. This is important. It will throw if it fails, so that the message is put back into the queue and it will try again. And in the end, it checks if the resource group is at this point empty, because it's not. If it is, then it can be deleted. I learned that the hard way when I found I had like 30 resource groups and no clue which one was empty or which one was not. Took a long time. So that's an example of a use case I found for storage, for a function app. I'm gonna move through this. So if you want to start learning serverless and Azure Functions specifically, Mark mentioned it already. I'm going to mention it again. You can now act on the seasons of serverless. There are 7 challenges available, 1 each week. We are now in the 2nd week. And in the seasons of serverless, you are able to do challenges, and that can really help you with starting to learn serverless and starting to use Azure Functions. Some sources I want to mention. I'm gonna promote my blog again, shamelessly. I have a serverless category, but you can pretty much find them. I've got posts on deploying through the portal and preparing for Visual Studio Code, on deploying through Azure DevOps, but also post about connecting to Cosmos database, connecting to the queue storage, and some of these stuff are not that well documented for PowerShell on the Microsoft Docs, so you can use this if you would like that. The Docs page I entered here is how you can deploy through Visual Studio Code. That's a great guide by Microsoft. You do not need my guide for that. I don't have it because this one is so good. And one I wanted to mention is my GitHub repository for 25 days of serverless, which was the challenge last year. And with 25 days of serverless, I did I think it's like 23 or 22 Azure PowerShell functions and some logic apps. But I did a whole bunch of examples there of, I think, pretty much every binding that is available and connecting to APIs. And if you like looking at examples, these are, there's a lot of them here. And I did write out that they are bad examples because I did this last year in 25 days. I had to create a function app every day. Some of them I did not know the technology and didn't have any documentation while I was working a full-time job. So it was pretty crazy, and this is not the cleanest code I have ever written. I have cleaned some stuff up. Like until day 13, it's acceptable, but after that, just looking for it for snippets. Don't copy and paste anything. Don't do that at all with stuff on the internet, but especially not on this one. But I do think it can be useful to see examples of how you can use Azure functions with PowerShell. So that was it. Well, I think I promoted my blog quite enough now. Let's do it one more time, forbes.nl. And you can hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. And I'll try to keep track of the Discord channel as well, if some questions are popping up.
Thank you very much. That was awesome.
So I did think
I was the applause. Yeah, exactly. That was really awesome. Yeah, you showed really a lot in that. Like 45 minutes. It was amazing.
I'm a bit over time, I think. Oh,
no, yeah. That's okay. Yeah, you showed so many things, and for me it was really useful because I'm more like a .NET person, so I don't know the PowerShell side that well. So it was really insightful for me at least. So I'm pretty sure it can be helpful for others as well.
I adore your showcase. I need your showcase because I always forget to clean up after a demo, and then the next day you get hey, you're spending money, and you don't normally spend money.
This has saved me so often.
Yeah, I also
it is available on my GitHub somewhere.
Perfect. Yeah, I also like the contrast between that very useful thing and then the name generator, which of course totally pointless, but so much fun.
I still get the giggles every time I run it.
I love it. Okay, very cool.
I have to ask, have you ever given a demonstration and got a name back that you wish didn't go on the screen?
Well, this was pretty much created for this
Okay.
event. We did it this weekend. I don't know. I was talking to Mark, and I don't know where it went wrong. And before we knew it, I had a storage account name generator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were just discussing some ideas, and yeah, like that, and it was there. I love this. It's really cool. Yeah, thanks for actually making it.
Yeah, it was an alternative for function app swag, I think it was.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I do like it. And what I also actually liked was the mashup of the logos that you made. But did you make that? The Azure Functions logo and the PowerShell logo? That's brilliant.
Yeah. So I thought so too.
Where can we buy the T-shirt? I think there will be a huge demand for that.
I actually have buttons and stickers.
Oh, perfect.
Because I bought some buttons and some other stickers, and then Corona happened.
Okay. Well, if you ever have a webshop online, we can put it in the notes of the YouTube and stuff like that. So yeah.
We ever get to see each other again, come find me. I have stickers.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent. Yeah, no, thanks a lot for all these insights. Yeah, it's really nice. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it was great. No problem.
I think it's time for a small break now. So let's actually do a 10-minute break or 9-minute break. And let's continue at 1:15. And then continue with Daniel, who's already waiting for us to go, but we'll do some quick tech check. So see you in a moment.
See you after the break, everybody.
Hey everyone, welcome back.
Hello again.
So I had some refreshments, so I'm good to go for the next speaker.
Yes, and speaking of which, we have our next speaker coming up. That is, please forgive me, Daniel, if I mispronounce your last name. I'm going to just claim being English here. Daniel Hendrikus?
Hendrikus.
Yes, I got it right on the second
Yeah.
attempt. Daniel is a developer and architect. His passion is mobile apps powered by Xamarin. Obviously, he also enjoys doing Azure, and that's why he's here joining us this evening. He's been enjoying sharing his knowledge, blogging, speaking, podcasts over the last few years, and I met Daniel at Svitug, if I pronounced that right, in Stockholm earlier on this year, and he's going to talk to us today a little bit more about Azure functions. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's always fun to join events like this. Yeah. I remember.
I think it's the one advantage. Sorry.
It's strange that you say that Svetug was this year.
Yes.
It feels so long time ago.
It seems unreal, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it was before the pandemic time.
Yes.
So it's really strange.
Yes.
That is the same year. So yeah.
Okay, take it away.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. So today I will talk about serverless with Azure Functions. I will give you an overview how to use it, and we'll have a .NET focus and C#. Yeah, as I said, I don't think I need to introduce me once more, but I also want to say that some of the knowledge sharing I've done is that I have written this book, the Summer Informs Project, where that also contains a few Azure stuff where you can integrate Xamarin and Azure. But let's continue to talk about Azure Functions. Azure Functions, serverless. I don't think I have to say that serverless doesn't mean that we don't have any servers, because there are servers in the bottom, but we don't need to think about them. So there are multiple ways to write Azure Functions. You can use C#. We saw recently that we can use PowerShell. You can use Node. We can use a lot of different technologies. And the great thing with Azure Functions is that it integrates very well with other Azure services. So I will focus a bit on that today, how you can use different triggers, how you can write your own bindings, how you can use dependency injections in functions, and when you should use it, and how you should architect your code in a function. But let's start about talk about the different triggers. You have in Azure Functions. Where is that slide? Strange. Here it is. I'm sorry for this. We have a lot of triggers. Here you can see some of the most common. We have a HTTP trigger that you can use if you want to do HTTP calls to a function. For example, if you want to build an API. I love using Azure Functions for building APIs. That's always my start point when I will build a new app, especially if it's on my own projects and not an enterprise solution. I will always start with Azure Function and Azure Table Storage, because that makes it possible for me to write an app with a backend that almost costs nothing, as long as I don't have any traffic and users. And if you build an app, you probably don't have a lot of users from the start if you already are a big company. But my spare time projects is not that big, and probably I will not get any big amount of users, but you never know. But the good thing with Azure Functions, if your app will get popular, it will scale without you having to do anything. And if you use, for example, table storage compared to Cosmos DB or a SQL Server in Azure, it's much cheaper. You only pay for the cost for the data that you store, because it's a storage account behind it. But if your app get popular, you need better performance. You maybe need to to scale over different regions, you can pretty easily do that by moving your data to Cosmos DB, because Cosmos DB also have a table API. So it's the same client library that you use when you're building a connection between table storage and Cosmos DB with table APIs. So that's pretty nice, but that should not talk about that today. But the other trigger that you often use is time triggers. For example, if you want a function to be executed every 5 minutes, every 30 seconds, whatever you want. So set it to. There are also a lot of other triggers or bindings, because you can say that triggers is something that triggers. And we also have a concept of bindings when we're talking about code. So some of the triggers is blob storage. For example, when a file is uploaded to the storage account and to the blob storage there, you can have a function running. For example, you maybe want to do some processing of an image that is uploaded to blob storage. You can do that after it's uploaded with an Azure function, and you don't have to write any code yourself to trigger that. Just add the blob storage binding to your function. Then we can use Cosmos DB in the same way. If you have any change in the database, it will trigger an Azure function to run. I will show you how that works later in this session. Then we also have Service Bus, and we also have Event Hub and the other Queue Hub services that you can use to connect your Azure functions to. So you don't have to write any code at all. You just need to add the binding and a connection string to your function app, and then you will get your function to execute when something happens in the queue. I will also show you how that works in a demo later. We also have Signal R and the Signal R service in Azure. So you can add Signal R as an input to a function, and then you can add messages to a list of messages, and then it will be sent to the Azure Signal R hub, and will be pushed to all your connected clients. So this is some of the triggers. There are a lot of more. If you search for Azure Functions triggers, you will find a long list. So we don't have time to talk about all of them today. Have some struggling with my slides here, but you probably heard about cold starts when we are talking about Azure Function, especially when running on the .NET runtime, and that's because every time an Azure function is executed, or at least every time it's started up, if you don't have had any functions running for a while, it will start a new instance, spinning up a new container, and run your function inside of that. And that means that there are a little bit of a upstart time, or that brings to a cold start, but there are solutions to get around that. For example, you can polling your Azure function every 5 minutes, because I think it's shutting down after 7 minutes without any traffic to it. And so if you're polling it every 5 minutes, for example, I used to use application insights and availability tests to do that. So you can use that to ensure that everything working, that your function answering, and you will also keep it alive. But you can also use premium Azure functions that have improvements regarding cold starts. They cost a little bit more, but you also get other nice features. For example, you can use them in a virtual network. The third way is that you can use your Azure functions inside of an app service plan. But if you do that, you're responsible for scaling and other stuff that you have in your regular website running on an app service plan. And it will share resources with other things inside of that plan, so it's not serverless anymore. So I prefer to running them on a consumption plan in most cases, because if I don't have any users, I don't pay anything. So that's nice, I think. We also need to talk a little bit about Azure Functions and .NET 5 before we start to show some code, because we recently had a release of .NET 5. And Azure was updated. You can, for example, run your code in app services with .NET 5, but you cannot run Azure Functions right now on .NET 5 in Azure. It can feel strange that you can that, because .NET 5 is a Microsoft product and Azure is a Microsoft product. But the reason for that is they have the underlying runner that run all Azure functions, even built with other languages like PowerShell and Node. They're running on a runner that are built with .NET Core 3.1. So they don't want to update that one before they are they had really good reasons, and they also working with rebuilding it, so it will be easier to have new .NET versions and other new versions, and but they will take some time to do that work, but it's in progress now, and there are a GitHub issue where they explain everything about why they not have upgraded Azure Functions to .NET 5 yet. Okay, let's dive into the fun stuff, the code. And Visual Studio, I think I will change the resolution on this screen so you can see it a little bit better. Larger text like this. So here we have the Azure portal. I have created all the resources needed for this this demo I will do, so we can take a look what resources I have set up. Function sample resource group. So I have set up a service bus, a single R service, of course a function app because it's a functions demo. We have application insights so we can monitor the functions running. We can open that in a separate tab so we can look at that. And also we have Azure Cosmos DB, and the storage account is needed to running Azure Functions. So let's open Visual Studio and we'll create a new Functions project. This is Visual Studio for Mac, but everything works very similar if you're using Visual Studio on a Windows machine. So you can create a new project. And the templates are under Cloud, Azure Functions. And here we can see all the triggers that we can select and that we have templates for. There are other triggers as well, but these are the ones that you have with templates. So let's create a new one with HTTP trigger. Get info. And we can set authorization level. Here we can have a functions where we had to send a key to the Azure function. We have anonymous and we have admin. Admin is also key, but it's another key than the functions key. We will use anonymous. If you want to have it protected, for example, by Azure AD, you can do that by setting up what they call easy auth in the Azure portal. I can show that too. So if you go to our function app here, we can take a look at authentication authorization, and then we can enable that, and we can configure a couple of multiple providers. But we'll not do that for this sample. So let's create the function. So here we can see how the template look. If we have a function, we have a static class, we name get info, we have a function name on this method declared by attribute. Then we have a run method, and here we can see how it will be triggered. It's a HTTP trigger. We have authorization level to anonymous, and it can be accessible via get or a post. If you only want get, we can remove post from here. And here we also can set up custom routes if we want to do that. Like this, and we have a request object and we have a log object in. So that's basically how you can
Sorry,
use.
Daniel. Could you zoom in a bit so we can
I can
look at the code?
I can make the font size a little bit bigger.
Thanks.
It's better now.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, okay. So here is where you declare triggers. I said, if you maybe see it better, and then you can return an OK or bit result or whatever result you need. So, but for example, if we want to have a function executed every time a service bus gets a message, we can pretty easily set that up. I have created a console app that we can run here to easily see how it works. So you can add messages to the service bus and like that. So I have prepared some functions here. So we have the function sample, and we have a handle order. Let's say that the service bus is a order queue that get orders from an external application, and we want to save them to a Cosmos database. So we can do like this. In this case, you can see that I'm using dependency injection. I prefer to use that even in my Azure Functions app because I want to have so little code as possible in the actual function. So I can use the code from other places. For example, if I want to replace Azure Functions with an app service and run it inside an web API project, for example, it's pretty easy to replace it with a web API controller instead. But to add dependency injection, I remove the static keyword from the class and make it so I can create an instance of it. And the same with the function. I will show you soon how to set that up. But we talked about the service bus and the order queue. So the thing I need to do here is that I use the service bus trigger attribute, and I will set the queue name and the name of the connection string. So the connection string is specified in Azure or in the local settings.json file. So if I'm running the function locally, it will use the value from the local settings.json file. So it's possible to debug and run the functions even on local, but don't install Xcode 12 because if you do, there are problems with the debugging. You can run the functions, but you cannot debug them. So if you don't need to have Xcode for Xamarin development, for example, or other iOS Mac development, wait with installing Xcode 12. So we can take a look at the portal, how it looks when you configure the connection strings. So we can go here to the configuration options. I can zoom a bit here as well. Maybe not that much. So we have configuration here, and here we have all application settings. So we can add new application settings here. We can add connection strings, but connection strings should only be used if you're using Entity Framework, as the text here says. So queue connection strings will be added here. So you can see here that I have the order queue connection. I also have connections to the database here and the Azure SignalR connections. So let's return to Visual Studio. So what I'm doing here is that I have changed, so I got a message because if you create a new function sample, a new function that are triggered by the queue, you will get an untyped message. I will show you that. So we create a new service bus function, and we will select service view queue trigger, give it the queue and connection string a name, queue name like this. You can see here that you have a string, so you need to deserialize that yourself, but you can just change to have a message, and you will get a message from the service bus namespace. I think that is easier to handle the serialization yourself. So here we have a message body. And we have a stream reader, and we are reading the JSON, because the actual message, the order, will still be JSON, but can easily access a lot of metadata on the message objects. For example, like we have expires, we have label, message ID, session ID, and a lot of nice things that can be useful. So when we have deserialized the object, an order, I will save it to the Cosmos DB. So we can try to run this. Before we run it, I will say that I also added the signal R binding here, with like this signal R hub name, and set the hub name to updates. You can specify whatever you want. You just need to have the same on the client side. Then we'll get an async collector of signal R messages that we can add new messages to. So just doing that, like adding a signal R message to it, and target will be basically a key that we will listen for inside of that hub. And we can send arguments to it, in this case just a string. So let's run the console app. It's just a simple console app. Here you can see some nice .NET 5 and C#9 things. You don't have to have a main method in a console app. So I have set up different scenarios where I push an order to the queue, the service bus queue here. With send message async, and that will trigger the function to run. So let's run it. And I use the signal R hub to get a message back to the hub, so we easily can see when it has run. So let's see where the terminal window is. It's show up here. I can zoom a bit here, I think, as well. So we will press 1 here to add a new message to the service bus. It's a new order. 1, press enter. Will take a few seconds because we have a cold start now. I haven't used my functions for a couple of hours. And now we'll get a message. The service bus trigger order with ID blah 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 is created. Then we'll also have a message from the Cosmos trigger and a random number. I will show you that part later. Okay, so let's talk about how I used dependency injection, because you'd want to use dependency injection for many reasons. I told you one recently, and the other one is that you want to have testability in your code. You want to be able to use interfaces and replace with mock data, for example. So what we do to use dependency injection is that we create a startup.cs file inside of your functions project, or you can call it whatever you want, because the most important part here is that we use this assembly attribute, assembly function startup, and you're told that the startup type is used for that. The other code is for a later demo. We don't use that right now. So the function startup class should have function startup as the base class, and then you, in the configure override, you can use this code to add services to the container. So it's basically the same way you're doing in an ASP.NET MVC or a Web API application. So that's pretty easy. Okay, so let's take a look at my other function, handle order updates, that have a Cosmos DB trigger that you will add like this. Cosmos DB trigger, database name, collection name, and a connection string. And connection string is specified as the same way as the service bus connection string. And then you set the lease connection name, and you also need to set this to true if you don't want to create that collection yourself. Then you will get a read-only list with documents as an input to this function. So in this case, I just check that we have an input, we have and for each input, I add a new signal R message to the queue. In this case, I use this just to notify that anything has changed in the Cosmos database. Okay, and let's talk a little bit about more of Singular RF service. I running it in a serverless mode. But to use that, you need to add the NuGet package that is called microsoft.azure.webjobs.extensions.singular service. And then you will get those triggered. So it's not included by default when you create Azure function project. So you add that with a NuGet package. And then you can easily use it like this. If you want to create your own bindings, your own inputs, for example, here I have added a random number attribute, and I have a parameter with the name number that is an int. I can use this to inject things to my functions. The random number binding is maybe not that useful, but it's pretty good way to demo how to use it. I work with a client where we use Azure functions and we have authorization enabled, and you need to have a key to the function to be able to make calls to it. We're using the easy out part. We have set that up. But with Azure functions, you will not get any claims back as you will get in Azure App Services. And in that project, I used a custom binding to create an attribute that I can use to get the user object back. So every time the function run, I injected user data into it. So I basically wrote code that run before that called the Azure AD to get the information back, and I also cached it, of course, of performance reasons. But to create this, we will go back to startup.cs. Because to do this, you cannot use the function startup. You need to use the webjobs startup. So we'll uncomment that and comment away the function startup. Then I have another class for that that looks like this. We have need to implement iWebjobs startup and use the configure method. And then we can add our dependency injection configuration like this, exactly as we did above, but we can also add extensions like this. So builder add extensions. And then I created a custom extension provider. So let's take a look at that provider. So I created a bindings folder here, and I have the custom extension provider that uses the interface extension config provider. I also have created attribute random number attribute that has attribute as the base class, and it had one property seed if you want to seed your random numbers, and we need to add the binding attribute to it, and we also need to specify attribute usage. So in this case, it will be as a parameter, and we'll use it like return value. We have other options here, for example, as well. But in this case, we will use return value. So let's go back to the extension provider. So we have an initialize method here, and we'll get the extension config context to it. And to that context, we can add a binding rule. In this case, we'll set that the type should be a random number attribute, and we will bind it to input. That means that it will be inputted to the function. We can have, for example, bind to stream, bind to trigger, bind to value provider, like this. But we will bind to input in this case, and we will return an int from it, and we will pass a func that is the code that will run. So just I wrote the code to generate a random number like this, and then I can use it in my handle order updates functions like this. And to show that it works, I also will write that number to the single R hub like this. So we can run it again. So what we want to do now is we can, for example, press 2 and just edit the document in the Cosmos database. And where we can see that the Cosmos trigger has run. And we'll get a random number back. As you can see, we'll get the same number, and that's because I had the same seed every time. So we can take a look at the live metrics stream in the Azure portal, and to see how the functions is running. Here is the application insights resource, live metrics. I will connect live to my function app. So here we can see the number of requests. We can see how many servers we have. In this case, we have one server. But if we, for example, will do a HTTP call to it, we will probably get a new instance. If we do a time trigger, we'll get a new instance for that. And that's the reason that you can use time trigger to keep the functions instance alive, because it will run different type of triggers on different instances. So it will not work like that. That's why I'm using a HTTP call and polling it. So we can run it here, for example. Let's add a message to the service bus. And we can see here executed, handle order, and handle order updates, because the Cosmos trigger will trigger on both create and it also on edit. We can try to do like this. We can try to edit the data in the portal to see if that also will trigger the change. We have the Cosmos database, and open the Data Explorer. We can do like this, so we can see the console app and the Data Explorer at the same time. So here we have the order collection, we have order database and the order collection, and we have all orders that are created here. And then we can edit them. Let's do like this, so we can still see the console, and we can go here and we can edit products. Oh, we can edit name. We can add my last name to the order as well, like this. And then we will select update, and we have the functions triggered and run, and we can listen to the changes. So that can be pretty useful. You don't have to write that code yourself to listen to it. It's pretty easy to add other services to it if you build and don't want to deploy changes to one application. You can add a new function that just listens to the changes like this. I think that is pretty nice and pretty useful. With the client I'm working right now, we're using a lot of different Azure functions, but mostly for listening to queues. We process a lot of data every day with that, and it's rock solid. Okay, let's go back here. So I will say thank you for inviting me to this meetup. And if you have any questions, I will be here for a while, and you can answer them in the chat, or you can reach out to me via Twitter, LinkedIn, or you can go to read on my blog. I mostly blog about Xamarin and Azure stuff, so hopefully you find something interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was
Daniel.
awesome.
There was so much goodness in there. You showed so many things. Dependency injection, the custom bindings. It was way more than I expected. It's really cool.
Absolutely. I've got a list of stuff. I've just been speaking to Mark, and he said the same thing. I've got to rewatch this recording. I need to do it just so I can get a list of the stuff I need to learn. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I will do it at a slower pace next time. But I'm getting so excited about it because I really love Azure Function. I think they are very useful. So, as I get excited, and I'll maybe talk a little bit too fast.
No, but it's really good. It was really in depth, and it was a very good combination then with the earlier session. So I really definitely enjoyed it. I definitely also learned quite a bit from it. So
Okay,
I definitely still need to look in these custom bindings. So this gave me a good nudge in the right direction again. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any other questions we can answer. So I think we're good for now. If people still want to ask you, you have all your contact details there, so they know how to find you.
Yeah.
So thank you very much also for getting in quite a late notice. So thank you for responding to our message on Twitter that we are still looking for speakers. So thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Stace. I think that's it for tonight. We had two lovely sessions.
Absolutely.
Both Azure Functions, but also quite two completely different sessions. So I really enjoyed that. I hope everyone had a good time at this meetup. And of course, I'll hopefully people will rewatch it on YouTube and then see all the goodness of both sessions. Again, if you want to help us out, if you want to speak or you want to help us organize something, please contact us. We can always use more people to speak, organize anything, and hopefully we'll do another conference in the new year. So we could definitely use some people there as well. So please reach out to us. And any last comments, Stace?
Yeah, I hope that everybody had as much fun as I've had this evening. It's been 2 sessions where I have learned so much. And it's been well worth my time standing here. It's I'm really happy. It's I hope that anybody got half as much out of it as I did, then I think they've had a good night too. I hope that's the case.
Exactly. Well, thanks a lot for co-hosting, Stace, and see you next time.
Yes,
Bye,
see you
everyone.
next time. Bye-bye, everybody.